on this computer. Hello, everyone. I am Penda James, and I want to welcome you to the Resilience Project, which is chats that I'm having with my friends because I have some great friends who are doing great things, and I want my friends to meet my friends so that we can do awesome things for the Lord. So, if you have seen my numerous attempts to have this conversation with Danielle, then you kind of already understand the story. But this is Danielle Graham. She is one of my dear friends. She is a mom, she's a therapist, she has a ministry. She you tell them. I have so much. I just want to get to the story. So tell them what else you want them to know about you.
I mean, that's it. We don't have to go into anything else.
Okay, so the resilience project is chats that I'm having with my friends, and each chat is a declaration. So if you don't have your journals, get your journal because I want you to write this declaration down. I lean on God. That is how I want you to think about Danielle, and that's what I want you to learn from her tonight. I lean on God. So, Danielle, tell us, what does it mean to lean on God in your definition?
Now Zoom just did the same thing.
It's okay.
Really?
We still I'm
Okay.
here. I'm still here. So what does it mean to lean on God?
Okay.
Now and then if this
For
doesn't
me,
work, I'm
leaning.
I'm gonna give you the three questions. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna give you the three questions, and I need you to do an essay, like talking to the microphone and send me the video. Okay.
And record the video, right?
Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
Um, so for me, leaning on God, trying to explain this before. I gave the analogy. I was able to go to New Orleans 2 years after Hurricane Katrina, and one of the things that stuck with me, I took a picture when we were driving through the Ninth Ward, and there were several spots where there were just foundations left, nothing else, no debris, no homes. There were a couple of spaces where foundations were cracked, but they were still there and for the most part intact. And so for me, leaning on God is hanging on to the foundation that I can rebuild anything that might have been
Leaning on
destroyed.
God.
Leaning on God is hanging on to the foundation and the trust that I can rebuild even when everything else seems to be devastated or gone. God is that solid foundation. That connection to God is that solid foundation that I can lean on Him and trust that I can rebuild anything that might have been destroyed.
Okay. How did you lean on God in those times when you didn't want to open the blinds?
Yeah. And so I started sharing before that for me, it started early. I'm someone who lives with depression and anxiety. I've had to come to terms with that understanding that that is something that has actually been a part of my life and a part of my life story. And so, even as a child, when I've had my foundation, my early connections with God, um, my family, my immediate family, I was raised by my maternal grandparents, my maternal grandmother specifically, um, and I was adopted by my maternal grandparents because my birth mother was murdered when I was a baby. So she was gone out of my life, had never known her. I was 16 months when she was murdered. My maternal grandparents adopted me, and then shortly after adopting me, they separated. So I was raised with a single mother. I had an uncle who became my brother because of the adoption. So I know them as my mom and my brother, right? My brother got diagnosed with severe mental illness when I was very young. He's 10 years older than me. And so I was very young. He was in his late teens. And so living through the turmoil of that, so you're talking about the late 80s, early 90s, severe mental illness. Anybody who knows anything about the mental health, world knows that medications and things were totally different back then. Um, and so it was a tumultuous experience, a tumultuous time going through that with them. I also had physical health issues myself. We, as a family, a nuclear family, did not go to church for several years. So from the time I was about 6 until I was 11, we didn't go to church as a nuclear family. There was really no real religious practice in our house. My brother was kind of exploring different things with his own spirituality and trying different things, and just in a whole different world, right? And the only time I really got connections with God and church was when I would go to Pittsburgh in the summertime to visit my nana.
Mm-hmm.
So I might get a week or two there, maybe even a month in the summer, right? And so I came home, and a lot of times I felt like I was by myself. I was a latchkey kid because my mom was a nurse. We don't have that happening anymore. So I
So,
got myself home, got in the house by myself often. And so I had a lot of times where I was alone, or I was being watched by my brother, who again was battling with his own mental health. And so there was a lot of turmoil within in my family dynamic, and I began praying on my own and talking to God. And I would talk to God about any and everything, right? And a lot of times I was crying to God because I felt like I did not match in this family. Yeah, I was adopted, and yeah, it was my biological family, but I always had this feeling of if if I do something wrong, they can get rid of me. She isn't really my mom because she wasn't. She was my grandma, right? So at any point, she could decide that, this is not worth it. It's too much. I went through all of these thoughts of, oh, well, she was just replacing the daughter that she left. And so I had a lot of internal turmoil, and I would take that to God. And there were times I literally cried. There were times I felt invisible. There were times I felt like invalidated. There were times I felt like absolutely nothing, and that my life wasn't worth living. And what was the point of saving me through all of that if I was only going to suffer? And I would in those times cry out and scream to God. And there were moments where I felt rage or utter despair and disappointment. And I literally, physically felt like the hands of God were massaging my heart and giving me peace and comfort. And it wasn't something I can explain to anybody. It wasn't something I even had words for at that time. Because again, I was really, really young, 7, 8 years old, where I have these memories and I can experience this. And I remember though in those moments hearing God speak to me and knowing that God was with me and knowing that I was going to be okay, even though I felt like I wasn't, right? And so in those early moments, I felt that connection to God. In those early moments were the foundations that were being built. In those early moments was when I was really leaning on God because I felt like I had nothing and no one else.
mm,
Right. While in many ways my mom was great and cared for me and supported me, offered me a lot of laughter and love that was unconditional. In a lot of ways, there was a deficit because she had never grieved the loss of my mom. And so that was something we never grieved together as a family. Right. And so I didn't have this space of when I was feeling hurt, when I was feeling lost, when I wanted to say I didn't feel like I belonged in the family. Right. When I had those places that happened with grief, I couldn't talk to her. And so I had to learn to hold that and stuff it myself. And the only place I could go was to God, and to feel and that connection, and to know that God was still present with me, and to have those moments where I felt God talking to me, there's a purpose for your life. Yes, I saved you for a reason. Yes, there's still something in you. Yes, there's still value. And yeah, this hurts right now, but I'm going to get you through it. I'm with you. You're not alone. All of that was the beginning, the early stages, the foundation that was being built, right? And I remember in those moments having this keen ear and spiritual eye that I could recognize the presence and power of God in others and other situations, even though I didn't really know the word that well yet. Even though I did not understand what that meant, but I could discern things. I never forget when my mom She went through a phase for about a year and a half, where she actually started studying with the Jehovah's Witness, and they came to the house. And I remember one time she was like, "You want to come and study with them?" And I was like, "Mm-mm." And something in my spirit was like, "Mm-mm, these people ain't right." These people ain't right. And I just went in my room, and I would go in my room and pray, Jesus, these people ain't right. And I don't know how to tell my mother these people ain't right, but I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those early connections, right? And that became essential as I moved throughout my life, where I did not recognize at the time, but was experiencing different bouts of depression,
Oh.
um, and different bouts of suicidal ideation and thoughts. I was thinking that my life wasn't worth living. I was thinking I was better off dead. You know, the family would be better off if I wasn't there. I wouldn't be a burden to them. I wouldn't be a burden to anybody else. They wouldn't have to be reminded of the child that was lost, and now be responsible for me. Um, and so all of that pain I was carrying and holding in myself, and I would just give it to God, and through crying and praying and worshiping was my only release and my only sense of peace. And I mean, truly a peace that surpassed all understanding. I mean, instantaneous peace at times. If you could feel the deepest pain and woe, anybody who's ever lost anyone who has ever grieved, anyone who's ever had severe pain or physical illness, to have an instantaneous moment of peace, I knew that was nothing but God. Nothing but God. And then I experienced that again in my later life, when I really started experiencing major depression and suicide as an adult. Um, I had those moments where God reminded me, I was with you in those dark places before. I'm still here. I'm still that same God. You can still cry out to me. You can still bring me your anger and your disappointment. I'm still here, and I still hear you.
So
And
I
so I
want
was
you to
able
talk
to
a little
lean
bit
on God
about.
again.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut. It was a little bit of delay. I didn't mean to cut you off. I want you to talk about depressed in the community
Oh,
of
that's
faith.
okay.
I want you to talk about what um,
Yeah.
I want you to address that Christians don't need to be depressed because we pray. Because we lean on God. We lean on God. So we don't get sad, and we don't people don't want to, terminate their lives because they're Christians and they can pray that out of them. I want you to talk about that because you are a minister and you live both lives.
Yes. Yes. Um, yes, it's almost like a duality, I feel like. So I started a group, a Facebook group, kind of a support group, also a space for encouragement and information, to talk about, to be a safe space to talk about mental health, um, and faith, and specifically depression, like the name of the group, Depressed in the Community of Faith. But to talk about depression, to talk about anxiety, bipolar, any of those mental health disorders that people experience while they still are trying to live out this life of faith, whether it's Christian, Muslim. So many people, especially minorities, if you have a faith community, often your faith community tells you your faith should keep you from having these issues, right? It's often attributed to demonic possession, or it's a spirit that needs to be cast out if you have depression, or if you have anxiety, if you're dealing with any kind of mental health challenge. Um, and so that space, right, when I was suffering at my greatest, I was active as an associate minister, which is where we met, Penda, at Mount Airy. I was active as an associate minister at the time. I was married at the time. I was in grad school. I was in seminary, working to go through, become a therapist, to become a minister, on that path of connecting faith and mental health. And a lot of it because of what I experienced growing up, and the trauma and the stresses of my brother, but then my mom, who also had panic attacks and anxiety disorder. And so seeing all of that, and also seeing and witnessing what I experienced growing up as a result, I was like, there's something more to this thing, right? There's something more to this thing about mental health and faith. It can't just be that it's a demonic issue. If there's so many people of faith dealing with it, that doesn't make sense to me, right? That doesn't make sense about who God is. That all the people that love God and trust God would all be possessed by demons. That didn't connect theologically or spiritually. right? And it didn't connect for me in terms of psychology being a discipline, psychology and therapy. When you start doing those disciplines and studying, just like you have people with physical health issues, you have people with mental health issues, right? This the same kind of thing. Our body and mind are connected and intertwined. We were never meant to exist only as spirit or only as body, right? Body, mind, spirit, all intertwined. And God wants us to live this existence that way. And so to fully live in that existence, I have to accept that sometimes, just like the physical body can be ailed, sometimes the mental, the mind and your emotions can be so ailed and so overwhelmed that you produce these health challenges, right? Or you wind up with these health issues. You wind up with severe trauma, or you wind up experiencing things like OCD or depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or any of those mental health things that can come, right? And so that space, when I was at my lowest, the place that should have been my saving space, the place that should have been my safe space, oftentimes was my tormentor. So going to church and trying to set out and say, hey, I think I'm battling with this, and having people come back at me, oh, you just ain't praying enough, girl. Mm, okay, I'm praying all the time. Or having people say, oh, don't claim that, but I'm literally going home from church feeling like I want to die and I don't want to live anymore. I don't know if I'm not claiming it's going to help, right? And so that became a really huge struggle for me because I could not reconcile how these people who love God and knew God, these people who were intelligent, could say those kinds of things and not realize how much those things were killing me even more. Because then now I'm going home and saying, well, dang, if I just need to pray and I have been praying and I'm still having this issue, then there must be something wrong with me. Then what am I doing wrong, God? And I couldn't find anything that I could do to make it right with the religious formula that was given. Because I'm going to worship, I'm going to every revival, I'm going to Bible study, I'm in seminary studying to do ministry, I'm helping people, I'm serving, I'm encouraging others, I'm praying at home. So what else do I need to do, God, if it's just a spirit thing? Right? And so I started talking to people about how sometimes the church is killing people by not being able to acknowledge we, one, sometimes don't have enough information about mental health. Two, we often are so uncomfortable talking about mental health that we end up hurting people instead of helping people. And so I
So,
created that space of depressed in the community of faith to talk about that so that we can help people understand I can be a faithful person and still live with depression or anxiety and might need help from a mental health professional.
so I want you to be reminded that this group is still important. Like, even as of last week,
Yeah.
seeing a post, someone saying we don't talk about this in church, and then someone saying in another post, I think that church people lean on therapists more than they lean on God. You need to lean on God, So leaning on God, if He tells you you need therapy, are you not gonna go? Because you don't believe that he
Right,
there.
right,
Some people think that psychology is not even a real career or a real thing that we need to
right.
have. So that's I think what you do is important, and I want you to be reminded that we still need to think about what in our minds, like especially during this pandemic. People don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
process. People don't know how to process. You can't go nowhere. You just at home, and
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes it was tough for me because I want to go see my dad. He's in Ohio. Like my sister, my niece, and my nephews, and they're growing up, and I can't go see them. It's hard. On anniversaries and
Yes.
my mom passing and things like that. I want to, I got my family here, but I want to see my other family too. And so I
Yes.
know how to reach out. I know how to say, Danielle, I need to talk about this. Or, I have a therapist. I have people that I talk to. I have sister circles. And so can you give people some tools? so that they can learn how to lean on God? What do you want them to
Yes.
know about leaning on God?
I think the first thing I want people to know is that when we lean on God, we can be encouraged that we can make it even through the darkest places. God is like that power, that existence, that spirit that pulls us beyond ourselves in our darkest moments, in the bleakest moments. God is that glimmer of light and hope. That if I can see that little bit of hope, if I can see that glimmer of light when I'm stuck in this dark, abysmal tunnel, I can know that I can get through this. I can know that God's going to send a life raft. God's going to send help. God's going to send support. God's going to send love and care. God's going to remind me that God is present and that God loves me and God supports me in spite of what might be happening around me. Um, just one literal experience with that was you, Penda. I've shared this story before, and you asked me if I was going to share the story, now. Um, but one of the first times I attempted suicide as an adult, a moment where you literally saved my life. And it was interesting because at the time we weren't as close, right? We were kind of just getting to know each other, just building our friendship as sisters. Um, and you had been at Mount Airy, and I had actually gone. I was living in Pittsburgh, but I had moved back home to Maryland at the time to get away for a couple of weeks because my depression was really bad. I had been feeling suicidal. My marriage was falling apart at the time. And again, church was not being helpful and encouraging to me at the moment, right? I was feeling like I was dying and lonely and isolated. And so I went home and I thought, God, this is it. I don't need to suffer like this anymore. I don't need to be a burden to anybody else. I don't need to try to have to muddle through this. And I remember getting a bottle of pills and I said to God, if you are real, if there really is something else for me, if there's still a purpose and a plan for me, if you still have life and hope for me, then show up right now. And even as I said that, I wasn't believing it was going to happen, to be honest with you. And as I said that, my phone was sitting on the nightstand. The bottle of pills was on the nightstand and a cup of water. And I had gotten a handful of pills and I got ready to take them. And right as I leaned down to reach for the water, I got a text message. And the first thing I saw from the message, because you know how your messages kind of pop up on your screen, even without you actually opening them, the
Yeah.
first thing I saw on the message was the words, hold on. And then I read your text. I opened it and read it. And you said, I don't know why I'm telling you this, because I don't usually text in church. But for whatever reason, the Spirit of God told me to tell you right now to hold on. And I said, okay, God. And I put the phone down and I cried as I'm crying now. um, but even more so then, I cried and I said, okay, God, you heard me and you really are telling me there's something. And I don't know if I said thank you to you then. I don't even know if I responded back at the moment. I know I did tell you later, but I don't know if I responded in the moment. But I remember reaching out to somebody else who was a member of the church, and she made a comment about reaching out to my pastor and like really getting support where I was in that moment. But it was the beginning of a turnaround for me right then. It didn't make me feel better because I was still in that dark place, but it was that glimmer of light, that foundation that even the rest of the house was gone. It was that reminder that there was a foundation. There was something still there. There was some substance that God still heard my prayer. God still heard my voice. And God was saying, I hear you. I see you. We're going to get through this together. And I literally had to lean in on God because I didn't have the hope for myself in that moment. I leaned in on God. And I said, okay, God, I asked for this. So I got to walk with you in this. I got to trust you because I don't see anyone else. The church has been hurtful and been painful. I don't know how to trust people. I don't know how to reach out because I don't feel like I'm getting the support I need. And he started showing me, you have sisters you can talk to. You have people you can tap into. You just have not been used to tapping into people and being vulnerable. And the people you tried to tap into weren't the people. They weren't who I sent you. I was like, okay, God, I'm trusting you in this process. And that's when we started really becoming closer friends. Because I was trusting God that there's some reason this woman's in my life. And there's some reason I'm in her life. And it's been amazing over the years that we have been encouragement to each other. I mean, I would say, and we
Yeah.
have pushed each other, at times where we're like, no, I push on Penda, as she said, nope, you're not going to sink into that low place, right? And then you've done the same for me. No, you're not going to go there. God does still have a purpose for you. You have a voice, right? We've developed a really amazing friendship over the years, right? But it started from that moment, that glimmer, that reminder that I had to lean into God in a space where I literally had no idea if God was really going to come through, and was questioning if God was really going to come through.
Yeah.
And because of that, I did wind up getting that as my tattoo. I don't know if you can see
Yes,
it,
I remember. I could see it.
right? And I was like, I needed that reminder for myself. And those words became like a mantra for me. I even think I posted those words in the group and would use that a lot as a tag in the group in Depressed and Community of Faith, telling folks to hold on, right? That we need that encouragement. We need that reminder that God is there for us to lean in. We can lean and depend on Him. But how we lean and depend on Him, it may not look how we expect it to look. And I did not expect you to be the one to reach out. I did not expect it to be a text message that stopped me dead in my tracks, right? When I was in that space of really ready to let go. That is just amazing to me and a reminder to me of God's presence, God's spirit, and the power of God to shine through and to use anyone and any medium possible. And in those places, I was reminded, even using the group, God brought that back to my remembrance. This is a medium that I can use and I can speak to people and I can speak through you and your testimony and your voice. I can use you and use your willingness to share and be vulnerable. And trust and believe that being vulnerable is not always fun or easy.
No, it's not. It's not. I've been so vulnerable during these resilience project moments, like sobbing and crying. Like I'm doing good right now, but when we've talked about it in the past, I've been like a puddle. It's interesting. I have another person who said the exact same thing to me, that he called me and he was calling me to say goodbye.
Mm,
And I was just like, your book is done. And he was like, what? And it changed them. And so I
mm,
often get to the place where I wonder, if the sacrifices that I make and the things that I do for people, if it really matters. But I'm just like, I
yeah.
have to do what God tells me to do, even if I don't always see the fruit from it.
Mm,
So
mhm.
that's hard because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm doing all these things and staying up all night and, just, I don't know this girl, but God told me to tell her, what if I hadn't? So I think that's the important
Yeah.
thing that we need to do is when God puts somebody on our heart, we need to speak to them directly. So this is what I want you to do as we end our chat. I would like for you to speak directly into the camera to somebody who needs to know that they need to hold on, and then tell them how to contact you, um, or your group or support or whatever, but speak directly to somebody who needs to hold on. She needs or he needs to lean on God.
My God. Um, I will start with just that. Hold on. Be reminded of even those small moments when your heart is broken, when you feel like you have nothing else, No one else. No one understands. No one hears you. No one sees you. God has forgotten about you. The church has hurt you. The church has left you destitute. When you're feeling at that lowest place, be reminded that our God will give you that glimmer of hope because our God is a God of love, a God of care, a God who created each one of us with a purpose and a destiny. And a part of that is to be a light unto other people. And so he's not going to leave you. He hasn't left you. And you got to hang on to that, even if it doesn't feel like it's real right now. Hang on to those little things because, like Penda said, had she not, and sometimes I think about that, had she not, but I also think about how simplistic just those two words were, hold on. Let's not always look for something big or drastic or something that is um, the miraculous or this big unicorn or this boom thing to happen. God speaks in that still small voice, and He's speaking even now. Listen, trust what you hear, trust when you see God because He loves you, He sees you, He hears you, He cares for you, and He does have a plan for you. One of the things I started studying that scripture, Jeremiah 29:11, for God knows the plans He has for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. But I began studying before and after the text. Any preachers know that. We got to
Yeah.
study around the text. As the preacher's wife, you know that too. I'm sure he'd talk to you about that left and right? When we really want to get the context and the substance of what we're reading. And it's those context clues when we learn how to do reading comprehension, right? It's the
Yeah.
same kind of concept. But when you read before that passage, when you read Jeremiah 29, verse 1 to 10, nothing about what God says there was hopeful. It actually was discouraging. They were in exile, and God said, "You in exile, and you're gonna be here about 70 years. So strap in and get comfortable." Is literally what verse 1 through 10 was talking about.
Mm.
Strap in, get comfortable. You're not at home, but guess what I want you to do while you're here? I want you to act like it's home. I want you to have families. I want you to prosper. I want you to pray for this land, even though they got you in exile. I want you to pray for its success because when it's successful, you'll be successful. That is a hard pill to swallow. And then you turn around and back it up with, but I know the plans I have for you. They're plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope in the future. So if you're sitting there feeling like this is bleak, this don't look like nothing that's hopeful, this is not encouraging, I don't want to strap into this. Remember that. God's hope does not come necessarily in the sunny days. God's hope comes in the darkest moments when we don't see anything else, when it doesn't seem like prosperity is even possible or survival is even possible. You can survive. You can survive health challenges. You can survive mental health. And there is hope and work for you. There is hope out there and support for you. And I'll guarantee you, if you look with God's eyes, there's people around you that's already there to help you in this journey.
Thank you, my sister. Thank y'all for watching. I love you so much.
Yes. And oh, and just
Oh, tell
to
them how to
say,
reach you. You forgot.
yes, you can reach me on Facebook. My name Danielle Graham. You can look it under Maryland because my name is so common in my picture. But then and also on Instagram, Ms. MZ Danny DANIE Marie, Ms. Danny Marie on Instagram.
Thank y'all. I love you.